good evening, and welcome. Thank you for joining us at CoffeeCon 2020 with My Child First. And today our guest has a very special place in my career as well. Saloni has done MPhil in Sociology from Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. She's worked in the development sector in the field of gender, domestic violence, street children, HIV and AIDS. She's a mother of two, and she's a graduate of Bharatanatyam and an urban gardener. In 2013, she co-founded a school based on Rudolf Steiner's education along with her sister Saloni Zutshi. For the last 7 years, Ukti Waldorf School has been providing a nurturing environment and wholesome education to the children of Delhi NCR. She believes in bringing all that is simple and natural into every aspect of our modern lives, be it education, parenting, food, work, or our lifestyles in general. It's my pleasure to introduce Saloni Zutshi. Hello.
Hi, Divya. Thank you for that.
Oh, we can't.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me here. It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
In 2008, Saloni and her husband walked into my childbirth class. She was my first hypnobirthing mom, and she had a delicious, from a birth worker's point of view, a delicious birth in water. And that was 12 years ago?
Yes.
12 years ago this November. And from that moment, I knew that this was a person who looks at the world a little bit differently. So I knew about birth, I knew about parenting, I know your breastfeeding journey. Tell us a little bit about how this school came to be.
Well, right, yeah. So as you mentioned, I was working in the development field for a while after I finished studies. And then I was pregnant with my firstborn. And something happened there. And I didn't recognize it at that time, but I figured in hindsight that everything that I was doing with him was not like what my friends or peers or other parents were doing around with their children. And by the time it was, the elder one was about 3, there were questions from family and friends about where we were going to send him. And we realized we hadn't thought of it. We were just happy having him home and, just playing around and doing what children need to do. And then, that question sort of started my search for schools around. And I went to a very mainstream school. I went to Delhi Public School, Mathura Road myself. I had a wonderful time when I was there. But I did know after becoming a parent in the current times that I didn't want to send my children there or to any other mainstream school for that matter. We were very fortunate. We found a wonderful small initiative in Noida at that time, which was an offshoot of Mirambika, which is an alternative school run by the Aurobindo Ashram. And we took him there for a while around the time that he was 4. And it was all very wonderful until it didn't meet us anymore. And they're still doing some wonderful work, but I realized I didn't want my 4-year-old or 4.5-year-old to be holding a pencil and writing while he should have been getting messy with the mud. So I decided to pull him out. And at that time, my husband asked me, what are you going to do with him? Do you know what you're going to do with him? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I do know what he doesn't need to do. And, we'll figure out something. And then I went and trained at Mirambika. I did an early childhood course there for a year. At the same time, my sister, who's also the co-founder of Ukti Waldorf School, she was exploring education for her children, who are almost the same age as my boys. She has 2 girls and I have 2 boys. And she lives in Berkeley in California. And she was exploring education there, and she met with Waldorf education there. And I was exploring Aurobindo's philosophy on education, and we started to exchange notes. And somehow, world of education resonated more with the two of us. And she's an economist, and she had been working in the field of health economics in the U.S. But both of us knew that while we were doing our own, we were following our own career paths, we knew that's not really what we were meant for. And we had this inner need to do something more meaningful. And then one day it just struck, and we said, if we really want to make a change, it has to be with the younger generation, and it has to be with education. And what better way to start with our own children? And so it started. Ukti started from my home in New Friends Colony in South Delhi, India, from our living room, and our whole house was turned into the kindergarten. We moved into one room of the house. The ground floor became, the garden, and the porch became the play area. And it started with two of our own children, so both my boys and another child from our family, and then one child from outside, so with 4 children. And now we are a family of about 85, 90 children, and we've slowly grown over the last 6-7 years, and it's been a wonderful journey.
So what is it about that philosophy that resonated? What is the philosophy of Waldorf?
Right. So Rudolf Steiner, whose philosophy it is that we follow, it's called Waldorf education or Steiner education. It is about, I think what resonated most with us was the beauty in the way that learning is brought to children. How, we have many alternative philosophies of education, and they're all very wonderful. But how Waldorf education really offers itself to be contextualized, to be actually translated into practice, and that I think really caught our hearts and minds, and that's pretty much what it was. Sorry, go on.
No. So I've heard feedback from a lot of parents whose children do go to Waldorf School. And one of the things that really stuck with me, which always stayed with me, is that it follows the child's development rather than having the child fit into another development. Mm-hmm. And that's just the bare bones of what I know. So why don't you elaborate on that?
Right, sure. So Waldorf education is often also known as the approach to education in terms of speaking to the whole child. Now, we hear it very often, that we must educate the whole child, but what does that really mean? In Waldorf education, we work in a way that we speak to the hands, heart, and head of the child. So the whole being, the hands referring to the physical being of the child, the heart to the feeling life, and the head to the thinking being of the child. But it is not just that. Steiner also talks about how we must educate the whole child also in terms of time. So what we are doing with a 3 or a 4-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old, how does that help the 14-year-old or the 3-year-old to live their lives when they're 40, 60, or 20? So how also everything that they do or every concept that is brought to them must be capable of expanding with the growing needs of the child. And he gives a very wonderful example here in this context, where he says that, if you have a child, who's say 3 years old, and the child has a pair of shoes, and now you realize that, the child doesn't fit into those shoes anymore. How does one realize that? We are very sort of aware of our anatomies and of our physical bodies. So we get to know, because maybe the child, groans and moans and the foot is hurting, and we can use our physical senses to see that the foot is not fitting in the shoe. And so we will bring, when the child is say 5 years old, the child can't wear the same shoe, that he or she was wearing when he was 3. So now we will go and buy him a new pair of shoes that fits him. How does it work then in terms of bringing concepts to children which are fixed, which don't grow, which don't meet the expanding physical or intellectual life of the child? So how does it work when you bring to a child 2 plus 2 is 4 at 4 years of age, and it still remains 2 plus 2 is 4 when the child is 14? So where is the learning happening in this? In contrast, for example, and I'm going to give a very simple example here. In 2nd grade, for example, we bring saint stories to children, stories of saints from the local context. Now, the reason is not spiritual or religious or anything of that kind. The reason why it's brought, again, is to meet the inner being of the child at the stage where the child is. In 2nd grade, children are experiencing themselves in the world in a kind of duality. They're experiencing the hare and the tortoise in themselves and in their friends. They're just about beginning to be social beings. So in the first half of the 2nd grade, we bring fables to them. So wisdom of the animal world is brought to them. In the second half, they now need to move from these basal instincts that they experience in themselves, and they're looking for some anchor. So now the stories of saints, the quality of each saint and how they overcame their struggles helps to meet the child inwardly and helps them in their outer life to meet the obstacles that they face in their social setting. Now, for example, in our 2nd grade, one of the stories we bring is of Mirabai. Now, the children are just listening to the story. It's nourishing for their feeling life. But later, when they do history of that region in the middle school, they will meet Mirabai again in a different context, but that will be a historical context. So how this very simple story then is brought in a different way at a different stage and meets the child at that time. And I think for this, what is important is to be able to first know who this child is, both as educators as well as parents. And in Waldorf schools and at Ukti as well, we work very closely with parents. Parents are co-partners in the learning experience of their children. So it's not just about putting your child in a school and the gate shuts and you forget about it and something will churn out at the end of the 12 or 15 years that the child is there. But really also for there to be a seamless experience between home and school life, the parents also need to understand who this child is and what to bring to the child and when. For example, how do we decide when our child is ready to read and write? Who tells us that? We're mostly guided by the external preset standards, right? You're 3 years old, the child, and now the child must be inducted into the school so they can go all the way up. But is the child really ready for that? And if not, what is it doing to the child? So if it is okay, I'm just going to speak a little bit about the different stages of development.
Sure.
Okay. So because that is what helps us then to this understanding of the different stages of development, helps us to meet the child where the child is. And that's really what we work with in Waldorf schools. So there are 3 broad phases of child development that we understand. One is from 0 to about 7, and then 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. It used to be about 7 years, 100 years ago, when Rudolf Steiner started this. It has come down to about 6 years now. But now this first phase of child development is understood as the phase of the hands, or the willing or the doing phase. So this does not mean that the child cannot think or is not feeling anything during this time. But what it does mean is that we as adults around the child need to recognize what is developing in the child at this time, and therefore be able to create an environment which is appropriate for the child to develop freely and in a healthy way. And that is all that our job is as adults around the young child. So now if in Waldorf schools, we don't teach children how to read or write in the first 6, 7 years of their childhood. And but then if they're not doing that, what is it that they are doing? What is it that will prepare them to do this later when they enter school, which is in first grade? So play. If there was to be a curriculum for early childhood in a Waldorf school, a written curriculum, it would be play, play, and play. Play is serious work for a young child. All learning happens through play. And there are a few aspects of play in Waldorf kindergartens that I would like to share. And before that, just to also share with you, the kindergartens we have are mixed age group. Because learning is a social experience, and we all know that. And I think that's the very first reason why people send their children to school. Otherwise, we could just have the child isolated at home, and the child would probably still learn. But it becomes healthy when children are learning in a social space, because it is a social experience. Children also learn very well in a mixed age group. So in our kindergartens, we have a mixed age group where children there's a certain range. So it's not like all the children are 3 years old in that group. Now, these children are pretty much playing, and that's their work, like I said. The play needs to be uninterrupted, unstructured, and we've often heard the word free, but what does it really mean for the play to be free? So imagine a scene that your child is playing and building something, and we're excited as parents, and the child shows us something or maybe doesn't, and we say, oh, wow, that's such a beautiful building. Or how many fish do you have swimming in that pond? Now, that's not free play, because what's going on for the child during play is the child is building picture images. And I'm going to share a scene with you here from our kindergarten. Imagine, there's a blue cloth, there is a meadow, there's a horse, a hand-knitted horse that, is very hungry and wants to eat the grass across the river in the meadow. And the children are coming together and, they need to make the horse cross the river. Now, there's a lot going on here. One is there's unlimited imagination. And why is that? It's because of the kind of material of play there is. It's open-ended. There is a lot of cloth, silk, cotton, long pieces, small pieces, which can become anything. The same cloth could become a cloud another day. There are wooden human figures with not very fixed features. So they can offer the scope of transformation. They can become a shepherd one day. They can become the girl or the boy himself. They can become the mother or, the driver or the father. And so there's a lot of possibility of transformation, which means there is unlimited scope for imagination. The other thing that's happening is the child is building these images. Okay, now, this is how the meadow will look like. This is how the river looks like. And then this will happen, and then this will happen. So there's sequencing happening there. And there are mental images being built. Now, again, coming back to why is it important? What is the child learning from this? This process of building mental images in the mind, that the child does, is actually the first step as adults for any analytical work that we do, any analytical research, whether it's in our professional lives or in our personal lives, whether we are conscious of it or not. The first step is for us to build a picture image of the entire situation or the issue at hand that we're going to analyze. The difference lies in whether we're able to make independent images or not. That's one of the reasons why in the middle of Silicon Valley there is a Waldorf school. Because what they're learning in the early childhood years through play is what helps them to become innovative thinkers in life later on. So the seed is laid right in the beginning. I'm not going to go into too much detail of that because I would like to share with you what happens later when the child grows. But very quickly to round off the early year. Sorry, did you want to say?
No. Carry on.
But very quickly to round off the first years, it's also important to know what is the relationship of the child towards the world. Because learning can happen when there is harmony between the outside world and the inner being of the child. And as educators, our role is to mediate this gap between the outside and the inside world. And in the later years, in the grades, it happens also through the curriculum, but also in the way that we teach. So now the young child, the feeling that the young child has towards the world is one of openness and trust. The world is good for the child. That's why a young child will, pick up things and put it in their mouth. They'll do everything. Children are not born with concepts of likes and dislikes. We often hear parents say, oh, my child doesn't like to eat that. The child wasn't really born with that. The child actually believes the world is good. That is the reason why young children learn through imitation.
Yeah.
Because they have this gesture of openness. It's almost like this. The world is flowing into them unhindered. There are no filters. They're going to imitate everything. They will imitate not just our thoughts, actions, and gestures and words, but also what's going on within us. And most parents of young children might have experienced this, that when you're making them sleep at night, nothing on the outside might have changed on a certain day. But because you're anxious, you have a meeting to attend to, or you have to catch a movie or do something, your child will not sleep that way on that particular night. So the children also imitate our inner state of being. Having said that, because they believe that the world is good, they learn through imitation. Yeah. Now, what is it that they need to learn then during this time? What is it that needs to develop? It is their inner will that needs to develop. And it can develop only during the early childhood years. It can be strengthened through life, but it gets increasingly difficult to develop this inner will if not done in the early years. And it can happen only through play. When children dismantle things and put them together, when they see the process of what goes on before a thing is presented to them. For example, a simple experience of baking a bread, as we do on every Monday in our kindergarten. It's not a cooking or baking activity, so to speak, but what they are really experiencing through this is when I put my hands to doing something, I can transform things. I can transform raw ingredients into baked bread, which I can eat. So the engagement with the process from start to finish gives them the understanding that I can change things when I get to it. And it has to be purposeful and it has to be meaningful. Drawing something and putting it up on a string for parents to appreciate the wonderful work that children have done is not meaningful for the child. The child learns nothing from it.
They do learn how to get appreciation. That limits the way they think.
That's true. And then they will do things only for this external gratification.
Because that openness of the child is also designed towards pleasing their parents in the beginning. There were so many things that popped into my head as you were talking. It was so wonderful to hear. And you said that trust. And in our coffee conversations, we've kept on talking about how trust is built right from even before birth and all the way through. So it's kind of a continuum of human life which rests on the bedrock of trust. We have questions coming in. Saloni, I want to take one. He says, what would you highlight as a major difference between approaches like Waldorf, Emilio Reggio, Playway, and Montessori? I'm sure you get asked that question.
Yes. With Montessori, actually Maria Montessori, sort of designed Montessori education in the beginning for children with special needs. It is very structured. There is a method, a detailed method to every little thing that the child does, and it works really well for children who need that support. World of education, I would say, the goal, I think, at the end of all of these different approaches is pretty similar. I think the difference really lies in the way that it is brought in practicality to the child. And world of education is it's very unstructured, it's very experiential. In the early years, everything happens through play. In the grades, we don't have textbooks, curriculum textbooks for children in Waldorf schools up to grade 8th. But children learn everything through doing. They make their own textbooks. They experience the phenomenon, and then they arrive at the concept. So I think I'm just going to go from here to the next phase, because we are also kind of running on time. Yeah. So, but before I go into that, there's one very important thing, and I think it might also be something that might be one of the points of difference with these other ways of educating children, and that one of those is that there has to be breathing in learning. And there has to be a rhythm, because rhythm is life. And for children to learn in a healthy manner, and even to grow and develop in a healthy way, then there has to be a rhythm. When children are born, and you would know this, Divya, their heartbeat is not rhythmic. Their breathing is erratic. The external rhythms of pooping and nursing and waking and sleeping help to bring these inner rhythms in harmony. Education also needs to have this rhythm of breathing. So the rhythm of breathing is actually what we work with in Waldorf schools, the rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. Because children are sensory beings, they're taking in everything from the outside world. And nowadays, more often than not, there is overstimulation. There's no way that a child will not take in something. There's a lot of influx from the outside world. We often find children suddenly throwing a tantrum or becoming stubborn or crying or doing something when you're doing everything to make them happy. It's because there is no alternation between the experience of breathing in and breathing out, digesting or exhaling what they have taken in. And this is something we work with even in our grades through the curriculum. We have a 3-day rhythm of bringing a certain concept, and I'm just going to exemplify that with something from grade 1, when the child enters into school. And before that, they haven't done any reading or writing. And the reason for that, one of the main reasons for that, apart from many others, is that their very physical body is not ready for it. The children's wrist bones are not developed yet for holding a pencil and writing. The independent wrist movement is not developed. Their feeling life is not developed. And that takes us to the second part. The first phase is the phase of willing, which is where we develop the inner will, the inner desire of the child to do, which carries the child through the rest of their years, through all the obstacles that they might face, whether in their student life or adult life. The second phase is the phase of willing, or the heart, the feeling or the heart, which means everything that is brought to them the child must be able to make a heart connect with the subject. And that's how the outside can be internalized and taken in. So how does this happen? Rudolf Stein, actually the first time I met Waldorf education is when I understood or heard that numbers have feelings. For us, math was a dry subject, When did numbers begin to have feelings? In first grade, when children actually learn about numbers in math, they begin with the quality of numbers, not the quantitative aspect of numbers, not with counting 1, 2, 3, 4, but really the quality of numbers. The teacher meditates on the quality of, say, number 1 that she wants to bring to the child or the children. What is oneness? Where do you find oneness in the world? There will be a story. So coming to the 3-day rhythm. So on the first day, there will be a movement. The child will move in many rhythmic ways to the count of one without knowing that this is one, with a lot of verses, a lot of beanbag rhythms, a lot of other rhythms, bringing the right and the left body in harmony, and the crossing movement. A lot of crossing of the midline is brought through movement, which is very, very critical to learning. And I see you smiling there, Divya, because nowadays we find so often that children don't move in free ways, which kind of stalls or does not help to develop their midline crossing, and which is very needed for the connections in the left and the right brain as well.
The hemispheres, yes, through the
Yes.
corpus callosum.
Yes, and helps in learning. So a lot of movement is done, and that's the first part of their learning in a day, which speaks to the physical body or the hands, as we understand. The second part in the same day is what speaks to the heart of the child, because in the second phase, from 7 to 14 years, like I said, the children learn when they make a heart connect. So there will always be a story. So there will be a story about oneness in the world, where maybe there is, the oneness which brings to the child images, rich images of oneness in the sky, in the family, in this, that, and the other. And then on the first day, all that the child does is there's a beautiful drawing, a chalkboard drawing, which you might, if you're interested, you can go and see online on any of the Waldorf websites. The teachers engage in bringing a lot of beauty to children in the second phase, because that is also something that they're looking for now. Unlike the first phase where the world was good for them, in the second phase, the world is beautiful, both on the outside and on the inside. So the teachers in a Waldorf school painstakingly make the classrooms very beautiful, their work very beautiful. They strive. The idea is not to do things perfectly or to have a perfect drawing. The idea is to strive towards beauty. And that is also something that inspires the children themselves to strive. So coming back to the 3-day rhythm. So on the first day, they will move in a lot of rhythmic ways through verses. Then there will be a story. And then there will be this drawing, which they will bring to their books. And their books are blank pages. They don't have any lines on their books, even when they write. So because the child is coming from this very open realm, and to bring them into these two small lines is a very, they need to transition into that slowly. So they find their own spatial orientation as they go along the grades. And so on the first day, they will make this drawing. And for the first time, they become aware of the tiny details in the drawing. It is through this that focus and attention is built also, because they love to see this beauty and they want to bring it into their books. And now sometimes they're stumped in first grade, like they pick up their crayons, ready to make it, and then they wonder, where do I start? So now they need to orient themselves. Where is the sky on my page? Where is the grass on my page? Where can the tree be? So all of this spatial orientation, the tiny details are brought in, and that's all that they do. And then the night must pass. And this is where the sleep comes in. The sleep in their learning, which is how they go to the next step. They must digest what they have taken in through the day before we move to the next step. So there is always a night that passes before the next steps taken in bringing the concept to the children. And most often than not, we find that children are able to make that leap themselves. For example, if in their math block, they've only learned about the quality of numbers, by the time they come back to the next block, they're already adding and subtracting on their own. And I'm just going to come to that rhythm. But coming to this 3-day rhythm, so on the second day, again, repetition, which is a very important R that we work with apart from rhythm. Repetition comes in, and they will repeat the movements, they will recall and review the story in artistic ways. So arts are very, very crucial to learning in a Waldorf school. They are not, the left and the right brain subjects are not, they don't run parallelly. but they're interwoven. They support and complement learning so that it becomes a whole, a wholesome experience for the child. We often hear of people being very creative, or, oh, that friend of mine is very intelligent and this one is very artistic. It's usually because we first drill the left brain, in the early years, and then we realize by third grade or fourth grade, oh, now it's time to send them to painting classes or to music classes. But everything is very sort of disjuncted. It's not a whole.
Do you know that the University of Utah did a research and they say there is no such thing as the left brain or the right brain dominance, and that it is through the feeling tone that you can access the analytical part, because if you don't feel safe, you can't analyze. And if you use your analytical part and not your feeling part, you're using a defense mechanism and not a decision-making mechanism. Because your left part will never give you an answer. It'll give you the next question, but it's your feeling tone that tells you this resonates or this I am okay with. And so and for life, you're doing brain gym, trying to cross your hands across the midline so that you, get the two-handed.
Right.
The whole brain.
Thank you, Divya, for that very useful input, very helpful input there. Yeah. So in a Waldorf school, the arts are equally important as, so to speak, right brain subjects are. And so now going back to quickly round off the 3-day rhythm. So on the second day, the children go through the movement which speaks to their physical body. They review the story with which they've made a heart connect through artistic ways, whether it's sculpting or it's painting or it's drawing or it's role play or it's freeze frames, many different ways. And then the teacher will now highlight either the letter or the number on that same drawing. And suddenly it's appearing out of a context. And this is the same rhythm that is followed for different subjects. So I'm just going to sort of switch from math to languages here in the first grade. And suppose they're learning the alphabet and they're learning the letter B, for instance. And on the first day they've moved to the rhythm of the form of the letter B. In many ways, they've heard the story of a butterfly with blooming blossoms and a bumblebee. So the phonetics are built in as well. They've seen this beautiful chalkboard drawing, which they've brought into their books, where there is a butterfly, but there is no bee in it. Now, on the second day, they're doing the same movement and some additional ones. They're reviewing the story through artistic ways. And now the teacher will highlight on the same drawing the bee, the form of the letter from the butterfly, and extract it and put it on the other side of the board. That's one of the reasons why in Waldorf classrooms we have boards which have many wings and you can do many things there with it. So now this bee is coming for them from a context. They will never forget. Now children learn in different ways. Some children learn through sight, some children learn through their writing or drawing. Some children learn through listening, and there's all of that built in here for them through the phonetics.
Multiple intelligences.
Yeah, and now contrast this with learning A for apple, or I don't know what it is nowadays. Maybe it's aeroplane for apple, A for aeroplane or something, where you have the written letter A. Now, the sense of sight tells them something. It looks like this, and then there is the image of an aeroplane. Both the images are disjuncted. There is no connection between the two. The sense of hearing, auditory sense, is disjuncted the experience as well, because A and then aeroplane, the sound doesn't is not in harmony. It's not matching. And now we're telling this little child to put all these disjuncted sensory experiences together and to make sense of it. They don't really make sense of it. They rote learn it because they love you so much.
Yeah.
And that's all that they can do. So, Now, on the third day, after they've gone through this whole experience, they have little blackboards. They will bring this burr from the butterfly and they will draw it. What they're not doing is they're not writing B. They're bringing burr from the butterfly in the rhythm that they have been moving. So it's really coming from the body, because learning begins in the bones. It begins in the physical body. So they're really bringing that rhythm on the board. And because now they are craving for beauty, the teacher will also sort of work towards building a sense of beauty in them. And okay, I'm going to just stop there with that. They do that, and then on the third day, the movement happens, the story happens, and then finally this B is brought into their books. And they will not need to repeat this mechanically 50 times. They don't forget, because they've internalized it in their physical body, in their heart, and then in their head. So that's the hands, heart, and head approach, in which all three aspects of their being are spoken to in terms of what is brought to them. I'm just going to go quickly.
There's a question. There's a question
Sure.
up for you as well. As soon as you're
Sure.
ready to take it.
Yes. We have most of the children from your school ended up doing post grade 5. Well, they go
So
into
basically, how
grade.
do you streamline it to the boards and such
Well,
like?
well, post grade 5, they go into the 6th grade. We add a class every year as we go along in Waldorf schools, and we have started with 6th grade this year in July now. So that is one. So after 5th grade, they go into 6th grade, into the middle school. But in case they need to transition, like I said already, they have already built such a strong will that I would be lying if I said the transition into mainstream, if they need to make that, it's not seamless. If I were to be honest, simply because they're doing things, they're learning in such an experiential way and such a beautiful way, but it is not difficult. And there are many children who make transitions to mainstream schools, and they do wonderfully well simply because they understand things, they have a strong will and an inner desire to learn, and they have the experience by doing things that when they do something, they can do it. They might fail and they will try again. And we encourage failure. We encourage children to make mistakes. We also, as teachers, we also allow ourselves to make mistakes in front of children, so that they learn that it is okay to make mistakes, because only when you make mistakes you can learn. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it clearly, but children are able to transition pretty easily, although not seamlessly, because it is a drastic change for them, and they might not like it, but they're able to do it.
Here's another one.
see-
I want to take this question before you go further,
Right.
because this is such interesting. I will lose track of time when you start talking again. So, it says, how do you integrate alternate education system like Waldorf with mainstream syllabus? And this is interesting because you're
Right.
adding a year every year. But ultimately, you are going to address an education system, hopefully, which will change by the time you reach class. And you're kind of approaching it from the two sides. Maybe there'll be a synchronicity, but as of now, how do you see that happening?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Divya. It is true, because with so much change happening in the education system in India, we're hopeful that there will. We don't know what the board system would look like and all of that. We are still 3 years away from affiliating with the board, and we will take that decision when we come closer to it. But in terms of the curriculum itself, to give you an example, in the 1st grade in math in Waldorf schools, children learn all 4 operations together as a whole: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Whereas in conventional schooling, they learn addition and subtraction in 1st grade, and then they learn multiplication and division in grade 2. Now here it's brought as a unity to them. They start from the whole to the parts. How do you make 8? So they see the interconnections. You can make 8 as 2 and 4 together, or as 16 divided by 2, or as 20 minus 12, or as 4 times 2. So the children are already able to see these interconnections, which is again supported with a very important subject that we have called handwork, where children in 1st grade learn how to knit. Now, it's not an SUPW subject, which has no meaning in their life, but it's directly linked to what they're doing in math. When they're knitting, they're adding loops, they're subtracting loops, they're multiplying rows, all of that is happening. So just to give you an example, So in terms of the curriculum, by third grade is where the curriculum starts to look somewhat similar, I would say, because there are, in the early grades, there are these differences where we're doing all four operations earlier than, not, I wouldn't say earlier, but at the right time, really, because it's brought in the way that meets the child. While in mainstream, it happens differently. By third grade, they're pretty much on a similar, I wouldn't say at par, really, because the curriculum in a Waldorf school is extremely rich, and it goes very, very deep, and there is a wide range in terms of the subjects as well. So, for example, in third grade, children are learning all about money. Now, they don't do math as a separate subject in third grade. It is again brought in a way that meets the developmental need of the child, of a 9-year-old child. I don't see that we have so much time for me to explain what the stage of a 9-year-old child is, but they're beginning to understand the world around them again. In a way, the oneness with which they experience the world in the early years is broken for them. They're experiencing themselves more and more as an individual, and now they're trying to understand the world around them again. And so what is brought to them is everything about living on earth. So the themes are food, shelter, and clothing, measurement, money, and time. What the early people needed to live life on earth. So we begin from how it used to be with the early people. What were the tools of measurement they used? They used their own body parts to measure. Why was there a need to standardize this measurement? Why could people not continue to use their handspans or, the cubit, their different body parts, or their very feet? So it is again brought through a story to children. They actually measure everything around them. Their classroom, the length and breadth of their classroom, their desks, their books. They use, this part for the inch. They measure everything, and then they find, and this is something I really want to share, because then they find sometimes when they're measuring their own heights with their handspan, they find that one child is getting shorter every day, which is actually not true. And then they on their own, they realize, maybe on the second day or the third day after staying with it, what is going on here? Oh, it is because our hands are different sizes. Boom. That's exactly the reason why early people needed to standardize measurement. And hence came the foot or a ruler. And then in woodwork, they will actually make a ruler with a wooden ruler, and then they will start measuring with this instrument. So now when they're measuring, math is brought through that. So all the operations are now brought through that. The conversions from feet, inch to yard, the other conversions in time from days to seconds and minutes, and money. Money is a big theme, starting from barter, because they needed that in the development of human civilization. We moved from barter to now money. So in third grade, children already learn all of that, from barter to actual money. They set up shops in the marketplace. They cook. They're learning measurement, estimation while cooking. They bring it to the market. They're selling. They're dealing with real money. They're learning operations through that. They're also learning how to convert the Indian rupee to euros and dollars. They're also understanding the value of a certain thing. How do you, what is more valuable? What determines the value? So they also, in a way, kind of work with demand and supply. Now, that's really economics. So we don't have a subject called economics, but they're actually learning all of this and a lot more. So that's what happens in the third grade. So in math, they're doing all of this. They're doing. They also learn how to do long multiplication and long division. But there is one thing I would like to share about math learning in a Waldorf school, which is that our focus is first that children develop intuitive thinking in math and mathematical thinking abilities before they go to dead fixed procedures like long division and multiplication, which they pick up like that in any case. But really, how are they able to think intuitively and in their minds? So mental math and intuitive flexible mathematical thinking abilities are what we focus on. And I see that we're really running out of time. So,
But there's a question that's been jumping in my brain as well, and it's right on the screen for you, saying, how do you find and train your teachers to maintain the standards and methods you talk of?
well, that's
Because I want to go back to school now.
Sure, that's a wonderful question. And ideally in Waldorf schools, how it began, and in the ideal scenario, the same teacher from first grade carries on all the way through 8th grades, but that doesn't happen anymore in today's world, even in Germany, which is where Waldorf education began. In Delhi, we're one of the very first schools in North India in the recent times to bring Waldorf education at Ukti. And I would be very honest to say it is not easy to find Waldorf teachers because they don't grow on trees. They don't exist. So what we look for is we look for people who are passionate learners, who are open to learning, who are actually sometimes and preferably not teachers already, because it's very difficult to sort of do away with the conditioning that is already there. And then we have our own training that the teacher goes through. So we have mentors visiting Ukti from around the world. We have mentors from the US, from Germany, and from other parts of the world who come, and teachers are constantly in training. We also have mentors, senior teachers from within India, from other Waldorf schools within India and Mumbai and Hyderabad, who also come and train teachers. Teachers also travel for training to these other places. We just finished an online training during the pandemic, which was being held in the East Coast in New York. So all the teachers were so committed, and they had to work through the night for a week-long training. So training there's always training that's ongoing, and we're always learning. We're in the process of learning.
If you think this hour is not going to be enough, I think many hours are not going to be enough, because this is such an interesting subject. And for the first time, it is being woven around children rather than what they need to achieve. I think somewhere in this need to achieve a certain percentage, we are losing a large percentage of our childhood. I want to go back to school and start. Here's another one. It says, do you plan to expand to a different location, perhaps in Delhi?
Well, if you find us a place in Delhi, sure. But at the moment, we are in Noida, and we do have children coming to us in Noida from different parts of Delhi. Parents also move near the school, those who are interested, and it's possible for them. We have a lot of parents who've moved closer to the school. But at the moment we are in Noida, and that's where we are. I don't know if you have time, but if you have a couple of minutes, maybe I just give a peep into what the middle school curriculum looks like, because we have just begun our middle school, and we're so excited, even though we've started this in the middle of the lockdown and the pandemic. But I'm just so excited to share how wonderfully and beautifully the curriculum meets the child in the middle school. So just very briefly.
Which is the age at middle school? Just I mean, it's been a long time.
12 years, about 12.
So stepping into the teens.
Yes, now that's the other very important shift that comes in. So there is the 9-year change and then the 12-year change. And now the child at 12 years is really has a huge inner desire to conquer the world. The child has now understood what this world is, has worked around, has seen geography in 4th grade. We already bring local geography and history to the child. I can't go into details of how we do that, but it's wonderful. I fell in love with Delhi all over again because I did history and geography with the 4th grade when I did it the last time. And now in the 6th grade, the child is all about wanting to conquer the world and is expanding in its individuality, just like the ancient Romans did. So in 6th grade, we bring to them history of Rome, really, and of course the medieval ages and all of that, all the way up to the time of Alexander, really. But what is it in history? We're not bringing facts and figures and numbers and dates to them, but really, again, can we bring those times alive? Can the child make a connect with the past and make sense of it in the present and work with it to go into the future as an adult. So now what is the need of the child? The need of the child is they're brimming with this energy to conquer the world. So you will also see a 12-year-old, sort of pushing boundaries. No, I don't want to do this. This is not fair. All of that. They have a huge need to be just and fair. They're looking at the world in black and white. And as educators, we help them, we facilitate through the curriculum for them to see the grays, to channelize this energy through the curriculum, through the characters in the Roman history, towards lawfulness. There was the laws and rules that came about in Rome. The republic was formed, the concept of a republic. It came from this whole need of conquering. But if the lawfulness had not come in, so really to round off the duality that the child is experiencing, or the ancient Romans did, and they have an inner need for this lawfulness. So through the curriculum, through these rich images of the historical characters, we help the child to mold, to guide their inner development, their own character in life. And so that's one. They also now begin to engage with the physical world. So there are subjects like geometry that is brought, because geometry is a very, very physical subject. You see it all around you. But what is most important, what meets the child again, is this whole, the lawfulness in it. When you follow a line, you get a certain result. There is a law in it. There's a rule in it. The other thing that develops for a 12-year-old is causal thinking. Before this, they don't understand cause and effect. You tell a younger child, you must do this because then this will happen. They don't understand that. Now is when causal thinking begins to develop. And so through the subjects, that is supported and enhanced. And subjects like geology are now brought in because they want to understand the mineral world. What is really this rock? What happened to it before? Physics is brought into them. But again, it is not brought in the way that we learn in conventional education. We follow a phenomenological approach. So the children will actually first observe the phenomenon. The teacher will actually do an experiment, simple experiments with children. Nothing is told to them before that. They actually see, they observe, then they record their observations, then there is a discussion, and then they themselves arrive at the concept. So we actually work backwards, just the other way around from how we learned.
Probably work better.
Yeah, and therefore we didn't learn. I mean, I don't remember so much of, the history or the math or, any other subject that I did. I'm learning all over again. Astronomy, this is the last thing I'd like to share. Astronomy is one of the subjects that's also brought in 6th grade only in Waldorf schools. So, so just to link it to the question of how we meet the curriculum, we're actually in Waldorf schools where actually the curriculum, like I said, is way beyond what a child is learning in conventional education. And even during the pandemic, we brought in astronomy where the children were actually standing on their terrace. They were observing the sky. Thankfully, they were able to do it. In Delhi, we had clear skies. The only silver lining.
We also had certain astronomical events like
eclipse. We did, and also the comet, and so they spent hours on their terrace observing the sky and the movement of the stars. Again, using their physical body, the handspan, the pinky finger, the little finger, which is 1 degree, to really see a star in terms of now the buildings and to measure it, and then to see how it moves. What is happening to the stars over 3 or 4 years. And that, what it does to the child inside, that is the connection they're making with something even up there, and that is how learning happens. Because
yes, but I'm also
from the outside.
I'm also thinking that they may never be bored.
Well, they aren't bored, but they also do become teachers. My own son is now teaching me fractions and decimals. And it is amazing how they and percentages, and just simply because of the way that they learn it,
Conceptual.
they
The
actually
conceptual level.
understand it so that they can also teach it already, and sometimes I actually honestly have to sort of prepare already or find the answer on the side, so that and sometimes my son sees through it, and I'm honest and say I don't know, and thank you for teaching me. So
I can't believe that. No, I can't believe that he can teach you, that I believe, but I can't believe that little baby I held in my hands is actually now teaching mathematical concepts to you.
Yes, and he is now.
So for me, I have a different view of it.
Yeah.
We are past the hour.
Overtime, yes.
No, we're not. We are never over time. So we have a little bit of a personal measurement on time here on CoffeeCon. If the conversation is interesting, but it has been very interesting, and I know that you can't give us all the information, and that's all. But it's really wonderful to see that education is putting the child first. That's always been our pursuit, to say, how does this fit to my child? Because our children are burdened with the fact that how they fit and then measure against a system that is absolutely not serving any one of us.
Right. Yes.
And for that, I thank you. It was a very, very interesting. I mean, I didn't have to even ask. I was so happy to listen. Thank you so much, Saloni, to be here with us. It was wonderful to hear from you. Thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.
Yeah, thank you, Divya. Thank you for having me.
You might still get some questions. If you follow us on our Facebook, you might have an opportunity to go back and answer them if you so feel.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And, for those people who are more interested, you can follow us on Facebook. And we keep putting some posts up there because it's never enough time to share everything about all the work that is happening and how the children are learning. Thank you so much, Divya. It's been wonderful being here with you. And
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, all right.
And good night.
Bye-bye.
And for everybody who's listening to us today and in the future, thank you so much for joining us on CoffeeCon 2020 with My Child First. Tomorrow we have yet another interesting conversation with Jyoti, talking about bonding through massage. This is something that has unfortunately been outsourced, and we think that it's a technical thing, but massage is more than mechanical moves, and it is all about communicating with your baby with all your senses. So we will see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.